to start with, we're going to be talking about Leeds United. And of course, we've seen Archie Gray lead the club in, I wouldn't say a surprise sale. What were your thoughts on the move for him? And do you feel the cash is going to be reinvested?
I'd like to hope so. Yeah, listen, I think it's a really good move for the lad. It's obviously a path that I trod a slightly later age than him. He's going to a very, very good football club in Tottenham with a manager that plays football in a way that's very entertaining. I think the thing from Tottenham's point of view, to get a player who played half the season last season at right back, it was a deal that was inevitable. I think we spoke on the WhatsApp we were in with that morning that we were all surprised that the Brentford deal had been accepted. But I think at the time, possibly Brentford were the only ones who put their money where their mouth was. And by Leeds accepting that, it kind of triggered others into action. I think the Joe Rodon part of the deal is a good part of the deal for Leeds. I think if they'd have hung on, they could have probably got more for the player. But obviously with PSR, FFP, that deadline of the 30th of June, and we're having to submit the accounts and everything else, I think it's a good deal for both clubs. But it's only a good deal for Leeds if the money comes back into the manager's spending account. We realise that all of it can't come back in, but a good portion of it you'd like to see going back in.
Pete, picking up on that then, how many players do we feel Daniel Farke wants this summer? And what sort of budget and remit is he going to be working under, given as well the parachute payments too?
Yeah, it's a difficult one for Daniel Farke because right now it's probably about keeping his players rather than signing new players. He's still waiting to see if Leeds are able to keep hold of the likes of Somerville, Jorginho Rutter, Willie Gnonto. There's obviously been interest in those three players. They've rejected a bid from Brighton for Rutter. Gnonto's been linked with a host of clubs, and also PSG have been mentioned now with Somerville as well. So it's going to be hard to keep hold of them. If they do end up losing those three players, they're going to need replaced, obviously. So I think that's what Daniel Farke will be looking at. He'll be hoping he doesn't lose all three. I'd expect maybe two of those players to leave before the end of the transfer window at the end of August. I think, obviously, those three players probably see themselves as top Premier League players, and they'll be hoping to move on to top clubs and not be playing in the Championship again. But for Daniel Farke's situation, obviously he'll be disappointed to see Archie Gray move on, but it was a necessity for Leeds to get a big money sale in for PSR regulations. Unfortunately, it was Archie Gray that was sold, but it was out of Leeds' hands really with that release clause in his contract, and Tottenham activated it. So yeah, I think it'll be a busy time at Elland Road during this transfer window. I think really right now it's about keeping hold of those players and seeing who wants to stay and then what value they can get for those players that they can potentially sell as well, and then reinvest it back into the club like Paul said. But right now, position-wise, probably looking at a central midfielder to play alongside Ethan Ampadu. Obviously, Ampadu had to slot in at centre-back on numerous occasions last season. Leeds will be hoping that's not the case, that he can play in his preferred position of central midfield, and if they can get a partner in for him, they'll have a really strong midfield. Joe Rodon is the first signing in through the doors at Elland Road. I think that's good business. They've beaten a number of Premier League clubs to him to get his signature on board, and obviously the player was really pushing for that move back to Elland Road. And then I think, as I said, if Somerville was to leave, which I do expect him still to go, they'll have to replace him with a winger, and then a right back's probably another key position for Leeds. Luke Ayling saw his move made permanent to Middlesbrough. Archie Gray played at right back a lot last season as well, so I think that's a problem position for Leeds now as well to try and rectify.
Pete, then picking up on that, I know you mentioned Gio Rutter in there, but if we look at Somerville particularly and that interest from PSG, what's his valuation in today's market? And how much, given the sale now of Archie Gray, how much could Leeds potentially ask for? And are we expecting them to be lowballed by any teams potentially?
Yeah, obviously, your first offer, you probably will lowball Leeds to see if they will bite and be open to selling Somerville. If you're looking at Archie Gray's price tag around 40 million, you got to think Somerville's around that mark as well. Obviously, Gray was a bit different as he had that release clause in his contract. There's no release clause in Somerville's contract at Elland Road as well. So I think between 35 to 40 million is probably the going rate for a player like Somerville, who remember was Championship Player of the Year last year. I'm sure the player himself wants to play at the highest level, so he might end up pushing for a move from Elland Road before the end of the window as well. When you've got teams like PSG reportedly interested in you, it's always flattering, I'm sure, for a player like him. So it's going to be a real battle for Leeds to keep hold of the Dutchman this summer, I believe.
And Paul, picking up on that, Gio Rutter, that 30 million offer that was rejected. Are we expecting further bids? And in terms of the front three, if you look at Somerville, Gnonto, and Jorginho Rutter as well, who out of the three would you prefer most to go if you had to say one?
Listen, I don't think Ruter's a bad price at 30 million. I'm surprised they turned that down. They obviously think they can get more for him. I think it was sporadic during the season. Pirro had a great start to the season, but neither of them really carried on the mantle of getting the amount of goals that you would want from a 9. But to be fair, in their defence, one played as a 10, as a false 9, and neither of them really got a long run as that 9. Patrick Bamford obviously would have been the preferred choice, but he hasn't been fit for the majority of the season. And I don't think you can rely on him going into next season to be fit. So I'd be surprised if Ruter didn't go for that type of money. If Brighton are at the table with that type of money already, then that's only going to get pushed up. So I think that's a good deal. Listen, if they can get 30 plus million for Ruter and some of it goes back into the side to reinvest in an out-and-out number 9, they've got Pirro who can play as the 10, the false 10. They've also got Dan James who can play in there, who'll do a really good job. Who, like we've said before, so surprised he didn't play in the playoff final, regardless of what position it was in. Somerville is the one that you would expect to leave. I think the 2 big names, Archie Gray and Somerville, they're the 2 that you would have expected to potentially have the bids in for. And I think it will be Somerville and Pirro. You can't really choose. It's difficult as from the outside looking in as to who you want to go. Ideally, you don't want either of them to go because they were an integral part last season and they missed out on the Premier League. So close. I mean, it wasn't the playoff final, in my opinion. It was the results before that. It was the home defeat to Blackburn, the draw against Rotherham. Those 2 results change, and they're in the Premier League automatically. So they weren't far off. So the importance of keeping the squad together is there. But I think with the chairman doing the interview that he did and being as open as he was at the end of the season, I think it made us all realise as to where Leeds were financially. But listen, we're not just seeing it at Elland Road. We're seeing it throughout the Premier League. We're seeing it throughout the Championship. Everybody's doing it. These deals, you scratch mine, I'll scratch yours. We're seeing teenagers go for record amounts of money so clubs can balance the books and help each other. And Leeds are not exempt from that. And it's an unfortunate situation that that's come at the same time that Leeds have had to stay in the Championship. And they've got some good players. Like Pete said, Somerville was Championship Player of the Year last season. He would be the one that you would expect that the big clubs come in for. If you can get 30 plus million for Rutter, I don't think that's a bad deal. So long as this is going back into the squad, because they've got to have a squad next season to compete to go up again. I mean, obviously, it's not all going to go back into the squad because of the financial situation at the club. But if you're going to let that amount of quality leave your squad, it has to be replaced.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.